Good morning, everyone. Harrison here. Welcome to the Arabian Pleb. It is Friday, the 25th of April, 2025, and it is ANZAC Day here in Australia. If there's anybody listening who's not from Australia, Anzac Day is a day we celebrate our fallen soldiers and those that sacrifice their lives to protect our country and to keep Australia relatively free. I would say, but I suppose the the saying sort of goes, free. Freer than it otherwise would be hypothetically if some foreign power invaded us and took over. So Anzac Day is a very special day for a lot of Australians and a very sad day for a lot of Australians. I mean, for myself, I have family members that fought, like great grandparents and great great grandparents that fought in both the world wars, World War One and World War Two, and so yeah, it's a day to remember those that sacrificed their lives, for the rest of us essentially, and for the whole country. So yeah, but today what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk a little bit about our military, our military interventions, and some of the more recent interventions post 9/11, because I think that it's very obvious now that those wars that Australia got involved in, due to the United States, have been catastrophes and utter failures, and all based on lies, sadly. And I know that, like where I live in northern New South Wales, there was a very young man, and I actually know his father. I play tennis with his father, but his son died in Afghanistan, and he would have only been at the time very early 20s, maybe, I don't know, but very, very early 20s. And that's an absolute tragedy. And I really feel for his family. I remember reading an article, and his father was interviewed, and he just didn't even want to talk to the reporters. And I can totally understand why. He would have been, and probably, and I assume still today, absolutely devastated. And I don't know how much he knows about the propaganda around the regime change war in Afghanistan against the Taliban, and against Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. But if he were to know how all those conflicts and all those regime change wars were based on lies, if he didn't know already, he'd be even more infuriated. But let's get into it, right? So, okay, so 9/11 happens, right? And also, sorry, I must disclaim as well, like, everything that I'm about to say is not an attack on any servicemen or women. It's not an attack on any of those guys. I have a lot of respect for our military and all the servicemen and women that enlist and join up for pretty selfless and what I would argue, for selfless reasons and having the best intentions, most of the time. I think the vast majority of our servicemen and women they join up because they sincerely want to protect our country, and for that I tip my hat to them, I and I respect that, and so everything that I'm about to say is not a knock on any of those guys and gals. Um, what I am saying, and what it is a knock on is our political elite and our leadership and our decision makers that send our brave young men and women to go fight and die in these foreign conflicts based on lies. So just to make that clear, you know, I have a deep admiration and a lot of respect for anyone who joins our military, uh, and 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 where this frustration um and my anger in pointing out all these lies, where that's directed at is our decision makers and our political elite. Right. So okay. So Al Qaeda fly these three planes into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001, and then that kicks off this whole shitstorm. And if you okay, so I think it's probably helpful to at least you know, um, like obviously Osama bin Laden was a mass murderer, and so he's guilty as hell for all that. But I think that it's a good idea to at least like look at his grievances and try and understand why he did what he did. And you don't have to believe what he's saying, but you have to recognize that what he is saying, uh, he he what he said enabled him to be able to recruit a whole group of people to be willing to uh, you know give their lives in the pursuit of killing others for this cause. Sorry, I just had a phone call. I had to take it. But so yeah, so um, let's have a look. Let's jump over and let's read Osama bin Laden's jihad against Jews and Crusaders. So this was his declaration of war, and in this letter, and so this was written 23rd of February 1998, and this is where he lays out his grievances, and sure, there's a heap of Islamic, like uh, whatever, like there's a heap of like radical Islamic shit in there, like he was a radical Islamist. But regardless, like it, he has grievances, some of them reasonable and some of them not. But okay, so all right, enough of me rambling. Let's go over and have a look. Okay, so this is where he gets into his grievances. All right, so this is the most important part. Okay, first, for over 7 years, the United States has been occupying the lands of Islam in the holiest of places, the Arabian Peninsula, plundering its riches, dictating to its rulers, humiliating its people, terrorizing its neighbors, and turning its bases in the peninsula into a spearhead through which to fight the neighboring Muslim peoples. If some people have in the past argued about the fact of the occupation, all the people of the peninsula have now acknowledged it. The best proof of this is the Americans' continuing aggression against the Iraqi people, using the peninsula as a staging post, even though all its rulers are against their territories being used to that end. But they are helpless. So that's number one. Second, despite the great devastation inflicted on the Iraqi people by the Crusader Zionist alliance, and despite a huge number of those killed, which have exceeded 1 million, despite all this, the Americans are once again trying to repeat the horrific massacres, as though they are not content with the protracted blockade imposed after the ferocious war or the fragmentation and devastation. So here they come to annihilate what is left of this people and to humiliate their Muslim neighbors. Third, if the Americans' aims behind these wars are religious and economic, the aim is also to serve the Jews' petty state and divert attention from its occupation of Jerusalem and murder of Muslims there. The best proof of this is their eagerness to destroy Iraq, the strongest neighboring Arab state, and their endeavor to fragment all the states of the region, such as Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Sudan, into paper statelets through their disunion and weakness to guarantee Israel's survival and continuation of the brutal crusade occupation of the peninsula. All these crimes and sins committed by the Americans are a clear declaration of war on Allah, his messenger, and Muslims. Okay, so I won't continue to go on, but so there's his grievances, right? So in the early 1990s, America invades Iraq the first time. And as the great Scott Horton, who I should just quickly mention, as I often do, but his great book here, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism, is a phenomenal read. Believe it or not, yes, I read it. Even though I'm a shit slow reader, I still can read, fuckers. Fuck yous all. Fuck you. But yeah, Scott Horton. So yeah, so that book there, Enough Already, is like the best book on all this stuff, on all these wars, right? And leading up to 9/11 and post 9/11. But so yeah, Iraq War One. So as Scott Horton would call the Gulf War, the first Iraq War, he calls it Iraq War One, and so like basically, if for those that don't know, I'll just give a quick little background. Excuse me. But so Iraq War One was America repelling Saddam Hussein for invading Kuwait. So essentially, Saddam and the Kuwaiti king, I guess, they had a like what was effectively a property rights dispute. So Iraq was going broke because they in the 80s they had fought a war against Iran, and it was a brutal, bloody stalemate, basically. And America, not surprisingly, backed both sides. So they openly, publicly backed Iraq, but they covertly backed Iran. And if you want to learn more about this, look into the Iran-Contra scandal, sorry, where the CIA and other elements of the American government were selling weapons to Iran vis-a-vis Israel, so using Israel as the cutout to sell weapons to Iran. So this was back when Israel and Iran were getting on pretty well too. Interestingly enough, they didn't change their posture against Iran until the 90s. But so they're using Israel to get weapons to Iran, and then with the money that they were covertly making through that deal, then taking that money that they had made from selling weapons to Iran and using that to finance the Contras in Nicaragua. I believe it's Nicaragua, something like that. But they were trying to overthrow a government there, and they were backing the Contras. So the Iran-Contra scandal. So look into that. But sorry, I just totally digressed. But so America's backing both sides, and anyway, so Saddam, it's a brutal stalemate. He ends up like something like 500,000 people on each side died in that war. And then so Saddam had borrowed a shitload of money from a lot of other neighboring Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and so on, and was in a shitload of debt. And so after the Iraq Iran war ended, and and also the price of oil had plummeted during this period because of interest rates getting jacked up so high. That's a whole other thing. But America went off the gold standard. There was massive inflation in the 70s. Massive inflation in the 70s, and then the central bank at the time they jacked up interest rates to combat this massive inflation, which then sent the price of everything plummeting. 1 second. Sorry about that. Just my friend just organising to go to the ANZAC luncheon. So yep. Every ANZAC day, one of my best friends, he's a ex-serviceman, and yeah, I like to do the ANZAC Day thing with him. We normally do the dawn service, but today, this year, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go do like a morning service and go to the luncheon. But okay. So where was I? Oh yeah, right. So Saddam's like in all this debt, and then the price of oil has plummeted, and then he saw no way of repaying these Arab states their money, and he was pissed off because he partly saw the fact of him fighting Iran. He viewed that as fighting on behalf of these other Arab states anyway, these other Sunni Arab states fighting against Shiite Iran and the mullahs and the Ayatollah. So he was pissed off about that, and then he was accusing Kuwait of slant drilling. So that they were like drilling into part of his property, part of like his territory, doing this slant drilling technique, and also breaking their OPEC agreements. Breaking the OPEC agreements and slant drilling. So he was pissed off with the Kuwaitis, right? So then Saddam invades Kuwait, and before he did that, he did notify the Americans, the ambassador to Iraq, I believe, was it the ambassador to Kuwait? He summoned the ambassador, April Glasby, to let her know about his dispute and what he was going to do. And they were saying, in their words, they were saying that they were saying that they could tolerate him doing this, right? And there was a lot of confusion around the issue too, because there were memos sent to Saddam saying don't do it, and then memos then the US government walking it back. Anyway, it was a whole fucking shit show. If you wanted to be conspiratorial about it, you could say that, and sort of Scott points this out in his book, that the Americans deliberately did this to like snare him in a trap, and then use that against Saddam. But regardless, and it, just to try and to steelman this whole thing and not go too conspiratorial, I think the best thing to do would just say like that there was just a massive failure in the communication with Iraq and Saddam Hussein. So anyway, so he invades Kuwait, right? And then the Americans, they're not having that, evidently, like once it happened. And I think they were saying like, we didn't think that there was American officials saying like that they would have tolerated him taking over certain oil fields, but they didn't think he was going to take over the whole country of Kuwait. So once he did that, then the Americans come in and they invade Iraq, right? And there's this massive bombing campaign, and then they put a blockade around the country, right? So they've decimated Saddam, they've decimated Iraq, they've killed a whole heap of innocent civilians, and then they're blockading the country, which is starving the innocent people, right? The innocent civilians of Iraq. And this is something that a lot of people have to understand, is that blockades, like Israel's doing to Gaza right now, or sanctions, which is just like a euphemism for a blockade, they never work. They never actually do what the stated goal is that they're meant to do, which is to like hurt the regime of whatever country that is being blockaded. All they ever do is starve innocent people. That it only ever hurts the innocent civilians. And a lot of the political elite of, say, America, when they're saying that they're doing this blockade or they're doing this sanctions regime, they will sometimes recognize that innocent people are going to get hurt, but their rationale is like, well, we're going to make life so difficult for the civilians that will get them pissed off with their government, and then they'll want to overthrow their government. How fucking retarded is that? You're starving the population, and then you're expecting them to then overthrow their government while they're fucking starving. It's just stupid. It's so fucking criminal, and it's evil, dude. It's terrible. It's fucking evil. So this is what Bin Laden's, pissed off about. He is pissed off. This is one of his grievances, and like it or not, people can say, oh, he's just a propagandist, and that may be true as well. But this was his way of recruiting other young men to give their lives to kill in order to kill others as a part of a strategic campaign. What they wanted to do was lure America into Afghanistan to break their treasury. And in the long and having the long-term goal of kicking them out of the Arabian Peninsula and the rest of the Arab world, once they had bankrupted themselves, which they haven't entirely left yet, and they're still in the Middle East, but goddamn are they bankrupting themselves. Like America's in, I don't even know what it is now, $37 trillion worth of debt, as of today, 2025. So yeah, it's fucking not good. Okay, so just to recap, right? So Bin Laden's grievances are bases in his holy lands, and specifically in Saudi Arabia, like in Mecca and Medina, and then the brutal blockade of Iraq and attacking Iraq, one of the the strongest Arab states in the region, and then thirdly, the bases in the Holy Lands, and then using those bases as a spearhead to attack Iraq, and then thirdly, support for Israel and their brutal occupation of the Palestinians and occupying the third holiest site in Islam, Jerusalem. I believe, as Bin Laden puts it, Muhammad's night travel land. So they're the three grievances, right? So, and this is in 1998. And then there's a list of attacks of Al-Qaeda attacks against the United States leading up to 9/11, which I should just try and find that really quickly. Just 1 second. Oh shit. Okay. So hang on. So before I read the list of Al-Qaeda attacks, I just found some other super fascinating piece of information. So this is regarding the Iraqi invasion, Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. I'll just read this very quickly. Fuck you. I'm going to fucking read it. Leave my reading alone, you bastards. Okay, so this is Professor Noam Chomsky, who's a leftist, but quite a good historian and good on a lot of these issues of war and peace. He just really fucking sucked on COVID and was an absolute piece of shit and destroyed his reputation entirely. But okay, so Professor Noam Chomsky kept note of some of the different opportunities to negotiate an end to Iraq's occupation of Kuwait in the second half of 1990. They were the August 12th Iraqi proposal concerning US withdrawal from all occupied Arab lands, the August 19th proposal that the status of Kuwait be settled by the Arab states alone, the August 23rd offer published by Newsday, and a similar offer that the Times kept under wraps, the New York Times kept under wraps at the same time, and the reported Jordanian and PLO proposals. Others continue to surface, receiving similar treatment, but the business pages of the New York Times and Wall Street Journal reported a near panic of stock buying late in the day on December 4th after a British TV report of an Iraqi offer to withdraw from Kuwait apart from the Rumaila oil fields with no other conditions except a Kuwaiti agreement to discuss a lease of these two Gulf islands after the withdrawal, Wire services carried the stories, but not the news sections. News reports did, however, express uneasiness that proposed discussions with Iraq, actually delivery of an ultimatum, according to the White House, might encourage some European partners to launch unhelpful peace feelers. So, so you know, like, fucking hell, man. Like, it didn't have to. It didn't have to. Uh, it didn't mean that America, had to go and bomb the crap out of Iraq and do this blockade of Iraq and fucking enrage these terrorists to then do what they ended up doing. Okay, so that's just the point of that. And that text is taken from Scott's book Enough Already. A lot of that was his words, and sourcing those Noam Chomsky reports. Okay, so the Al Qaeda, where is it? Okay, let's find the. Okay, so these are the Al Qaeda attacks leading up to 9/11, 2001. The 1990 assassination. The 1990 assassination of the radical Rabbi Meir Kahane, founder of the Israeli Quds Party in New York City, over support for settlement expansion in the West Bank. The botched Yemen hotel bombing, December 1992. The attempted Aden Yemen attacks in April 1993. The first hit on the World Trade Center, a failed bombing in February 1993, killing 6 people, and the bomb maker was Ramzi Youssef. That's something that people tend to forget is there was a first World Trade Center bombing, which they tried to that Ramzi Youssef tried to topple one tower into the other, which is fucking hectic. The thwarted plots against the Lincoln and Holland tunnels at UN headquarters in New York City by the same cell that did the first World Trade Center attack. Ramzi Youssef fled to the Philippines and later caused a fire in his apartment. Cops seized his laptop and found plans to assassinate Pope John Paul II and Bill Clinton on their scheduled trip to the Philippines. A plot called Bojanka, a scheme to time bomb 10 or more airlines over the Pacific Ocean. A test run failed but did kill the Japanese businessman whose seat Youssef planted a small bomb. Plots to hijack airliners and crash them into targets on both US coasts. The planes operation, which later became the 9/11 attacks, in the hands of Youssef's uncle Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The Saudi National Guard bombings in 1995, which killed 5 Americans. The Khobar Towers attack in 1996 at Dhahran. I can't pronounce that. Dhahran, I guess. Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, killing 19 US airmen. For political reasons, the US government blamed the attack on Iranian-backed Shiite Hezbollah. Iranian-backed Saudi Hezbollah. August 7th, 1998, in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, Al-Qaeda struck again with dual truck bomb attacks against the US embassies there, killing hundreds of people. Killing hundreds of people. The thwarted Millennium attack on Los Angeles International Airport in 1999. A failed attack on the Navy ship, the USS the Sullivan in January 2000. A foiled plot against the Radisson Hotel in Amman, Jordan, and the rubber dinghy bomb attack on the USS Cole at port in Aden, Yemen, which killed 17 sailors in October 2000, and then the eventual 9/11 attacks. So look at that, dude. Like, I don't know how many people like know about all that, but that's astonishing. And that, as far as I remember, I mean, I was pretty young at the time, but I was born in 1990, so I was very young in a lot of the early 90s attacks and whatnot. But even today, or as I got a bit older, and post 9/11, in the early post 9/11 years, no one ever brought any of that up. I don't remember anybody bringing any of that up. how pissed off Al Qaeda was with the United States and what their grievances are, and how they had just been continually attacking them since the Gulf War, since Iraq War One. Right. So, okay. So then the 9/11 attack happens. The planes get flown into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, and something like 3,000 people are slaughtered in those attacks. 3,000 innocent American people, which is a fucking tragedy. And, it's a disgusting terrorist attack, and it was fucking awful. And then in response to that terrorist attack, America invades Afghanistan, right? And Osama bin Laden did have bases, did have training camps in Afghanistan. So, there is a good argument for America going after the people responsible for those attacks, like, for sure, but they should be doing it and only trying to kill the people responsible, right? So they go in, as Scott Horton says, like, they could have wrapped up this war against Al Qaeda before Christmas 2001. Like, they had decimated their training camps, had killed the vast majority of the terrorists, and they had Osama bin Laden cornered in Tora Bora, in these mountains in Afghanistan. And there was I'll have to look up. I can't remember the names of the generals or the heads of these operations of the U.S. military, but they brought plans to George W. Bush at Henry Crumpton. Hang on, let me double check. I think it's Henry Crumpton. It's Henry Crumpton. Jeez, I got a good memory, eh? So this guy. Let me just see if I can enlarge in that. Yeah, this guy right here, right? Henry Hank A. Crumpton is a retired Central Intelligence Agency operations officer who served as deputy director of the Counterterrorism Center and as head of the CIA's National Resources Division, which focuses on operations in the United States. In the early days of the invasion of Afghanistan, Crumpton led CTC Special Operations paramilitary forces in the pursuit of the Taliban and Al Qaeda following the September 11th attacks. Crumpton also planned a large incursion alongside others like Greg Volger and Chris Wood. He was later appointed by President W. Bush as coordinator of counterterrorism at the Department of State, with the rank of ambassador at large on August 2nd, 2005. He's an author, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Henry Crumpton. So this guy, as Scott details in his book enough already, this guy literally laid out a map in the Oval Office in front of George W. Bush and was saying, I just need reinforcements. I just need the Delta Force and I need whoever else, and we can get Osama bin Laden. And as Scott details in his book, George W. Bush says no. And he allowed him and Dick Cheney, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, allowed Osama bin Laden to escape into Pakistan. And as Scott details again in his book, is that they didn't want to get the enemy too quickly. If they got the enemy and won the war, then they wouldn't be able to expand the war into Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Syria, Yemen, so on and so forth. Which is very fucked up, which is very fucking cynical and sounds fucked up and conspiratorial, but that's the goddamn truth, goddamn it. Okay, so now I just want to play this clip. So this is General Wesley Clark. And let me just pull up some information on who Wesley Clark is so I can give you guys a bit of a background. Rightio then. So, General Wesley Clark, born 23rd of December 1944, is a retired United States Army officer. He graduated as valedictorian of the class of 1966 at West Point and was awarded, blah, 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 blah. He later graduated, blah, 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 blah. He commanded an infantry company in the Vietnam War, where he was shot 4 times and awarded a Silver Star for gallantry in combat. Clark served as the Supreme Allied Commander Europe of NATO from 1997 to 2000, commanding Operation Allied Forces during the Kosovo War. He spent 34 years in the U.S. Army, receiving many military decorations, several honorary knighthoods, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Okay, so he's commander of Allied forces in Europe. Okay, so this guy is no schmuck, and he's a big deal when it comes to the military in the United States. Okay, so now I'm going to play this clip, right, just to give you a little background on who this guy is. So I'll just get this queued up and let me go over here and have a listen to this guy.
The Pentagon, right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me." And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, "You remember that?" He said, "Sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you."
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again.
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
Dudettes, are you fucking serious? Hang on, let me go back there. Okay. Every one of those countries that he just named have been overthrown, except for 1, maybe 2. And okay, so except for Lebanon, although Lebanon has been severely destabilized, and the rise of Hezbollah in Lebanon is because of that destabilization and Israel occupying southern Lebanon for 20 years or something, close to 20 years, until Hezbollah kicked them the fuck out. So, and then that gave them a lot of political legitimacy. But every one of those countries, every other one of those countries have been overthrown except for, essentially, I guess, technically Lebanon, but also Iran. And who are the war hawks and the knives out for right now? And this, it's Iran. The next war that all these neocons and neoliberals and war hawks are looking for is they want to overthrow Iran. So So Paul Wolfowitz, as the general just said there, Paul Wolfowitz brings Wesley Clark this memo and says that they've got plans. This is just after 9/11 of invading all these other countries. And if you sincerely want to know why that is, because none of them had anything to do with 9/11. Okay, so I suppose I'll wrap up shortly. But the point of all this, and the point of showing you all this is, and going through this stuff, is that to emphasize that the Taliban, Saddam Hussein, they had nothing to do with 9/11. They weren't responsible for those flying those planes into those towers and into the Pentagon. That was Al Qaeda. That was Osama bin Laden and his men. And I know there's a lot of it's a whole thing, and there's a lot of stuff that you can dig into about Al Qaeda and who was funding them. And it was the Saudis, Saudi Arabia, and also looks like there's Israel had a lot to do with it as well. But America's not trying to go to war with them. Australia's not trying to go to war with any of those regimes. We're not sending our young men and women to go fight and die fighting Saudi or Israel or the UAE. But all these other countries that we are going to go fight and die and try and overthrow, all these other governments we're going to try and overthrow and invade, who are they? Well, they were all Israel's enemies. Okay, so especially Saddam Hussein and especially Gaddafi in Libya and Assad in Syria, none of these are America's enemies. They're Israel's enemies. And in actual fact, as I stated earlier at the start of this episode, Saddam and America had a great relationship, and there's actually there's an infamous video and photo of Donald Rumsfeld meeting with Saddam Hussein, shaking hands, and the purpose of that was to shore up the American support for the Iraq-Iran war, and supporting Saddam to take out newly Shiite Iran, because the revolution had just happened in 1979, and the Shah got kicked out of power, and the Ayatollahs came to power, and America didn't much like that, and so they were backing Saddam publicly. America had a good relationship with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. So all these wars are based on lies. That's just the thing I want to emphasize. And like I said at the start as well, like none of this is to knock our servicemen, our servicewomen. I think that they join up the military with good intentions, most of them, and they want to protect us all, but the sad truth is that our political elites and the ultimate decision makers lied them all into going and invading these foreign countries that actually isn't in Australia's interest at all, or for Americans isn't in America's interest at all. It's all just lies. So the lie in Afghanistan, the need to take out the Taliban. Did I show this article? Or maybe I didn't even. Did I show this article? No, I don't think I did. Okay, so let me just double check. Oh, maybe I did. Hang on. Okay, I can't remember if I did or didn't, but I'll just quickly go to this share screen. Like, you guys can read it for yourself. I won't read it. But Bush rejects Taliban offer to hand bin Laden over. This is a article that was in The Guardian, and this was written on the 15th of October, 2001. So this is like a month after the 9/11 attacks, and America's already bombing the crap out of Afghanistan, and the Taliban were essentially wanting to negotiate with the Americans and just saying, like, look, if you can just provide us some evidence that Osama bin Laden is guilty, and you stop the bombing of our country, that we'll be willing to hand over Osama bin Laden to any third nation, like a third party. Like they were willing to hand Osama bin Laden over to one of these other Arab states, which are client states of America anyway. So like if the Taliban handed bin Laden over to Saudi Arabia or one of these countries, Kuwait or Qatar, something, Bahrain, that they would have been compliant with America, absolutely, and would have handed bin Laden over to the Americans. So the Taliban were just trying to get the bombing to stop and just saying, just give us some evidence that he had done this, which should have been easy for the Americans, and they would have got the guy responsible, but. Yeah, so Bush is just like refusing to negotiate. I don't negotiate with terrorists was the fucking dumb line at the time, and then just continued to bomb the crap out of them. So the lie that the Taliban had anything to do with 9/11, the idea that they had anything to do with it was fucking bullshit. That was just an absolute fucking lie. The argument would be like, oh, but they gave aid, and like they housed the enemy. They allowed these terrorists to have training camps and whatever else, and allowed them to plan the attack. But the Al Qaeda were not just in Afghanistan. Like they traveled to the United States many times and did a lot of planning in the United States. Who was it? It was like, I think it was Muhammad Atta or some of these other guys that were in Al Qaeda. They were getting like lessons in America of like how to fly planes, not really wanting to know how to take off or land. But so there were a terrorist attack can be planned anywhere. Like that doesn't mean that wherever it's planned, that means that that host nation, the government of that nation is guilty of anything. Like that's fucking bullshit. So that's a lie. So there was no need for the for the regime change war against the Taliban, and it was an utter failure. After 20 years, once the Americans and the Allied forces pulled out, the Taliban rolled right back in and toppled that piss weak government that the Americans had installed there and had been training for 20 odd years. So that was fucking dumb and bullshit. And then the lie of weapons of mass destruction, which we all know, like it's just like a cliche now. But Osama bin Laden has weapons of mass destruction, and he could pass on a dirty bomb to. Oh, sorry, not Osama bin Laden. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. He could pass on a dirty bomb to. Bin Laden and his men, and then Kansas might get nuked or whatever. I think that's what Dave Smith always uses. But that's what he says. But yeah, that was the propaganda at the time. So. Like that was fucking bullshit. There was no evidence that he had weapons of mass destruction at all. And in fact, the only chemical weapons that he did have were the ones that Reagan had supplied him in the 80s to use against Iran. But that doesn't ever come up. But so. So that's all bullshit. And then, obviously, like, and maybe I can do another episode in the future on like the rest of these, just the rest of these catastrophic wars to do with the war on terrorism. Like, it's spreading out into Libya and the war on terror in Somalia, which that rarely gets mentioned as well. I believe against Al-Shabaab. I think I have that right. Hang on, I'm going to double check now. I have to. Yeah, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, the Islamic Emirate of Somalia. But anyway, like if you look into all that, like all that's just fucking bullshit anyway. Like they're not like a global terrorist organization threatening the United States. But anyway, George W. Bush launches a war against those guys too. And that's still going on, Yeah, it's been over 20 years now, bombing Somalia. I remember when Trump got into power, and like when he first got into power in 2017, he was like, "Why the fuck are we bombing Somalia?" Yeah, because it's fucking all bullshit. And then yeah, so the war in Libya, which then that's when America's America's switched sides and is then now backing the terrorists. And you got to remember too, actually, how did Osama bin Laden even end up in Afghanistan in the first place? It was when he was being backed by the Americans backing the Arab Afghan army, the Arab Afghan freedom fighters, the Mujahideen, against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan in the 1980s. That's how bin Laden ended up there in the first place, was through American support. So America's has, been fighting for the terrorists and then fighting against the terrorists and switching sides in that war on terrorism for decades now. So I'll wrap it up there. But yeah, I just thought it was worth making this sort of video, on ANZAC Day in Australia. It's a very, it's a very special day for a lot of Aussies, and and rightfully so. But I think it's just, I think it would be a disservice to anybody, not knowing the truth. We all have to recognize the truth and just reckon with it, and it'll be beneficial for future generations. So hopefully that they don't get propagandized and buy into all this bullshit and don't go fight and die for a senseless cause. So yeah, all right. God bless everyone. Much respect to our servicemen and women. It's a special day, but it's a sad day, ANZAC Day. And yeah, just God bless everyone. Hope you have a lovely day and take care. Peace out.